All right, low Saturnalia, happy Yule, everyone. Merry Christmas, wherever the hell you are. It's the solstice holiday, and they're all the same fucking thing. All right, today we're going to go back into the Fool. This is the second part, or part one. Maybe the first one was part 0, because that's kind of what it was. And you know, I think it's interesting that I'm doing it on this day because it's like the day when, like, Christ, death happened on the first part of it, and now it's the second. But let's get into it, shall we? Without rambling on too much, because I've noticed people don't really stay for long if I talk a bunch of irrelevant nonsense before going into the actual topic. So let's begin. So we left off from like the formula of the tetragrammaton. If you haven't watched it, I would say go back and watch it. It sort of talked about the concept of the Fool, and the marriage of opposites, and how it sort of all comes back into a zero, and how the element of air works and all that other kind of thing. So this is the Green Man of the Spring Festivals. So, you know, it's kind of funny that we're talking about that now, while it's the festive season. So let's get into it. So this tradition represents the original idea adapted to the understanding of the average peasant. The Green Man is a personification of the mysterious influence that produces the phenomena of spring. It is hard to say why it should be so, but it is so. There is a connection with the ideas of irresponsibility, of wantonness, of idealization, of romance, of starry dreaming. That's holidays, I guess. And interesting. The Fool stirs with all of us at the return of spring, and because we are a little bewildered, a little embarrassed, it has been thought a salutary custom to externalize the subconscious impulses by ceremonial means. That is an interesting part, because if we are to sort of bring up the subconscious or the unconscious mind, we tend to use ritual to sort of toy with the unconscious mind and see what we can get from it. And you do this through means of stuff like Goetia, ceremonial magic, or psychedelics, if that's what you're into. So there is that. Okay. Yep. It was a way of making confession easy. Of all of these festivals, it may be said that they are representations in the simplest form without introspection of a perfectly natural phenomenon. In particular, we are to be noted the custom of Easter egg and the Pose d'Avril, the saviour fish, is discussed elsewhere in the essay. The precision of the equinoxes has made spring begin with the entry of the sun into Aries, the ram, instead of Pisces, the fish, and was the case of the earliest time recorded. Yeah, so it's referring to, I guess, Easter, actually, like was supposed to be the death of Christ. And like from Pisces, which is like water and water, or water of water, into Aries, fire of fire, as the two different polar opposites. The Great Fool of the Celts. This is a considerable advance on those purely naturalistic phenomena above described. In the Great Fool is a definite doctrine. The world is always looking for a savior. Yeah, man, don't fucking do that. Seriously. Like, always, like, I guess, follow people who know what they're talking about and that kind of thing. But don't watch the hands of your master. Do not, follow everyone's words to a T. It doesn't matter if it's Albert Pike, Aleister Crowley, or I just stop myself from saying Sadhguru with an F at the beginning ending with a G. If you get my drift. So yeah, we shouldn't. The world is always looking for a savior in some respect, but the savior is within the Christos. Anyway, continuing. And the doctrine in question is philosophically more than a doctrine, it is a plain fact. Salvation, whatever salvation may mean, is not to be obtained on any reasonable terms. That is 100% true. I did not do, because I was sort of really into the sort of self-help stuff for quite some time. And it's usually very conventional sort of wisdom that people sort of intuitively know anyway, or even consciously know. But it's the big problem I find with a lot of self-help is it's more about obtaining discipline or how to hustle. Really, that's most of self-help culture, and it's AIDS. It's AIDS, man. I hate it. I didn't go through that route to get to where I am. It was a lot of heavy introspection and a lot of plant medicine. So reason is an impasse. Reason is damnation. Yeah, because reason only comes from, in a sense, only from above, like from what's given to you. Like you use your reason to navigate, I guess with whatever situation you're in, right? And the only way to really break out of that and to sort of transcend that sort of thing is to sort of actually not have reason to begin with. So there actually needs to be chaos because, as I was saying before, as we were talking about in the other video, so it's sort of like the feminine that moves forward first, and then the masculine immediately comes in. So there's that to think about. Yeah. Reason is reason only madness, divine madness offers an issue. The Lord of the Lord Chancellor will not serve the law. Will not serve the lawgiver. May be epileptic camel driver like Muhammad, a megalomaniac provincial upstart like Napoleon, or even an exile. 3 parts learned, 1 part crazy, and an attic dweller in Soho like Marx. There you go. So there needs to be a bit of madness if you want to actually, I guess, become a little bit of a fool. There needs to be some kind of madness involved. Otherwise, there's no real progress. So basically, like, the reasonable man sort of upholds the sort of status quo, and the unreasonable man moves, and both of them are needed, because if there was just nothing but madness, there would just be constant chaos, and nothing would really fucking get done. Let's put it that way. Okay, and there is only one thing in common among such persons: they are all mad. That is inspired. So yeah. Madness, inspiration, that kind of thing. Some kind of divine madness to sort of get you out of that sort of loop of thinking. Nearly all primitive people possess this tradition, at least in a diluted form. They respect the wandering lunatic, for it may be that he has a messenger of the Most High. This queer stranger, let us entreat him kindly. May that we entertain an angel unawares. Like, I can think of a few mad people that, like, first one that actually kind of springs to mind when we're talking about, like, madness and I guess divine inspiration and impulse. The most modern example, I think, is someone like Terry Davis. Despite what you may think of him with his antics on race and that kind of thing, he was a genius programmer, and he made something called Temple OS, which is supposed to be God's third temple, and it was done using assembly language with no external libraries, and to make an operating system by yourself with no external libraries. That is apparently like a monumental, monolithic task, and he basically built. It was a one-man skyscraper job, essentially. Okay, closely bound up with the idea of the question of paternity, a savior is needed. What is the one thing certain about his qualifications? That he should not be an ordinary man. Yeah, don't. Ordinary is the death of that kind of divine madness. So maybe don't worry about being ordinary, people, or being normal or trying to fit in, because that actually stops you from, I guess, becoming one of these great fools. In the Gospels, people cavilled about the claim that Jesus was the Messiah because he came from Nazareth, a perfectly well-known town, because they knew his mother and family. In brief, they argued that he did not qualify as a candidate for Savior. Yeah, so that's an interesting thing, because he was fucking roach. That he was like a divine lunatic. Well, that he wasn't a divine lunatic, and he was actually more about reason and everything. So interesting, we're talking about Christ on Christmas. Savior must be a particularly sacred person. They should be a human being at all is hardly credible. At the very least, his mother must be a virgin, and to match this wonder, his father cannot be an ordinary man. Therefore, his father must be a god. But as God is a gaseous vertebrate, he must be some materialization of a god. Very good. Let him be the god Mars under the form of a wolf, or Jupiter as a bull, or a shower of gold, or a swan, or Jehovah in the form of a dove, or some other creature of fantasy, preferably disguised in some animal form. Yeah, so this is just referring to archetypes, I guess, and how archetypes actually manifest and materialize themselves into corporeal form from the universal mind. There are innumerable forms of this tradition, but they all agree on one point. The Savior can only appear as the result of some extraordinary accident, quite contrary to whatever is normal. The slightest suggestion of anything reasonable in this matter would destroy the whole argument. But as one must obtain some concrete picture, the general solution is to represent the Savior as the fool. Well, it makes sense, actually, because, I remember in my life, I was clinically dead when I was born. I had an Apgar of 1, which simply means I was dead, but I was somehow revived. So there's all this other kind of, and there's a lot of extraordinary things about me too that I'm not going to go too into. I'm sort of tooting my horn a little bit, but I also got to make sure I stay humble and that kind of thing. Because, for many reasons, I don't want to become a narcissist like Sadhguru, who believes he's the only one who has the answers. Because I don't have all the answers, but I know for a fact that I have a great amount of wisdom. There's a difference between being humble and being unconfident. If I was unconfident, I wouldn't be fucking doing this, right? But I also got to make sure you humble myself all the time. Attempts to attain this condition appear in the Bible. Note the coat of many colors of Joseph and of Jesus. It is the man in motley who brings his people out of bondage. Call him Harlequin, and a tetragrammaton evidently burlesquing in the sacred family spring to sight. Pantaloon, the aged antique clown, and Harlequin, 2 aspects of the fool, and the Columbine, the virgin. Being burlesque, the tradition is confused and the deep meaning lost, just as the medieval mystery play of Pontius and Judas became the farce with opportunistic topical variants Punch and Judy. Multiple colors, yeah. Multicolored is definitely great. Well, I think the whole multicolored aspect, I think this is really important, okay? So the fool is multicolored because he's representing light. He has this full spectrum of light about him. He's multicolored. It doesn't mean he's necessarily dressed in motley and he's wearing all kinds of silly looking clothes or sort of zany colors. It just simply means, I guess, his psychology is multicolored and his psychology varied. And his speech varied and all that other kind of thing. That's what motley sort of represents. And yeah, I didn't think about that before. I only just thought about it now. It will be seen later how this idea is linked with that of mystery of paternity and also the iridescence of the alchemical mercury, one of the stages of the great work. Cool. It's 13 minutes. My phone. Yeah, so now we're going into Percival, which is a very interesting kind of one. The rich fisherman, Percival. The legend of Percival, integral to the mystery of the Saviour, fish god, and of Saint Grail or Holy Grail, is of disputed origin. It appears certainly, first of all, in Brittany, the land of best beloved of magic, the land of Merlin, of the Druids, of the forest of Broceliande. Some scholars suppose that the Welsh form of this tradition, which lends much of its importance and its beauty to the cycle of King Arthur, is even earlier. This is in this place irrelevant, but it is vital to realize that a legend like that of the Fool is purely pagan in origin and comes to us through Latin Christian recensions. There is no trace of any such matters in the Nordic mythologies. Percival and Galahad were innocent. This is a condition of the guardianship of the Holy of the Grail. Note also that Mont Salvat, Mountain of Salvation, home of the Grail, the fortress of the Knights, Guardians, is in Pyrenees. So I think that's just more more analogous and allegorical of like the mountain to sort of climb and the Holy Grail. And you know the Holy Grail is never too far away. Honestly, that's what I find kind of interesting. It's sort of what's represented in labyrinths when you see them in many traditions. Like they're always like the paths are always close to the center, but you never quite get there. Yeah. Okay. It may be best to introduce the figure of Parsifal in this place because he represents the Western form of the tradition of the fool, and because his legend has been highly elaborated by scholarly initiates. The dramatic setting of Wagner's Parsifal was arranged by the then head of the OTO. Parsifal in his first phase is Der rein Thor, the pure fool. Thor. Fuck. It means fool. There you go. Referring Thor, the pure fool. That is, like even Thor, which is the son of Odin, represents the fool. So think about that for a second. And he's multicolored, but like Thor's hammer and that kind of thing. I think, and think about the parallels here. Like Thor's hammer, like he's the only one who can pick up the hammer. A bit like how Arthur was the only one who could pull the sword out of the stone, and I think it's more representative of because when you talk about the sword and the phallus, it's sort of stuck in Malkuth. So the sword or the weapon used or the intellect is stuck in earth. It's in the fucking ground. It's stuck in the stone, and only a true hero would be able to pull it out. There you go. His first act is to shoot the sacred sword. It is the wantonness of innocence. Okay, yep, another one. Breaking of sacred cows and innocence and all that other kind of thing. That's a very interesting point because a big part of, I guess, initiation, and Sufis do this a lot, and so do Shivite Hindus, if you go to Aghori and things like that, is to transgress what is considered ghastly or immoral even, and to essentially integrate it in such a way that you can understand like the holiness of everything. So like Shivites, for example, I know for a fact that a part of some of their initiation is to eat beef. And we all know that cows in Hindu culture are sacred. But like in order to sort of transcend that, you have to break and slaughter your own sacred cow and eat it. And I think, yeah, the first act is to shoot the sacred swan. That's the same thing. Same idea. And the second act is the same quality that enables him to withstand the blandishments of the ladies in the Garden of Kundry. Klingzor, the evil magician who fought to fulfill the conditions of life by self-mutilation, seeing his empire threatened, hurls the sacred lance, which he had stolen from the mountain of salvation, at Parsifal, but it remains suspended over the boy's head. Parsifal seizes it, in other words, attains to puberty. This transformation will be seen in the other symbolic fables below. It's kind of interesting, yeah, throwing the sword at someone only for it to miss and then somebody uptakes it. I think that's sort of representative of, because since the sword is the intellect and it's above your head, it's above his head and he pulls it out, it usually comes from like a transgression or some kind of adversary to begin with, right? So there's that. And that's how you obtain the lance, as it is here. Okay, in the third act, Parsifal's innocence has matured into sanctification. He is the initiated priest whose function is to create. It is Good Friday, the day of darkness and death. Where shall he seek his salvation? When it is Monsalvat, the mountain of salvation which he has sought so long in vain. He worships the lance. Immediately the way so long close to him is open. The scenery revolves. Rapidly, there is no need for him to move. He has arrived at the temple of the Grail. All true ceremonial religion must be solar and phallic in character. It is the wound of Amfortas, which has removed the virtue from the temple. Amfortas is the symbol of the dying god. Interesting. So it's, I guess, it's the same as Osiris and Christ, and I guess also Odin. Accordingly, to redeem the whole situation, to destroy death, to reconsecrate the temple, he has only plunged the lance into the Holy Grail. He redeems not only Kundry, but himself. There's a doctrine only appreciable in its fullness by members of the sovereign sanctuary of the Gnosis of the ninth degree of the OTO. Speaking of which, if you look at the Gnostic Mass, you'll see that the High Priest actually sort of plunges both the lance into the cakes of light and also the Grail before the high priestess. I can't really speak further of that, but there's definitely a connection there. You can go watch the whole Gnostic Mass if you want to on Vimeo. There's like a really good quality one, and it's probably a good one to go look at if you're so inclined to understand a little bit more of this. Okay. The crocodile, Mako, son of Set or Sebek. The same doctrine of maximum innocence developing into maximum fertility is found in ancient Egypt in the symbolism of the crocodile god Sebek. The tradition is that the crocodile was unprovided with the means of perpetuating species. Compare what is said above about the vulture molt. Not inspired, but because of this, he was the symbol of maximum creative energy. Freud, as will be seen later, explains this apparent antithesis. Interesting. I think that's like phallic energy when it's not being used. I guess you become have a greater sense of creation. I don't completely understand what's been said here. I'm not going to pretend to, but that's something to be considered. Because like in Dionysian mysteries, which is like in antiquity, initiates were tended to actually go into celibacy and all other kinds of things, and Dionysus is sort of associated with fertility and the harvest and festivals and things like that. So that's something to think about. Once again, the animal kingdom is invoked to fulfill the function of fathering the Redeemer. On the bank of a... Oh, actually, sorry. I'm so sorry, guys. I had to stop and think because there was actually this one really curious case. I can't remember what happened, but there was a crocodile. You can go look this up. There was a crocodile that actually had immaculate conception. Like there was no male involved, and this female crocodile actually gave birth to a bunch of eggs, and apparently that she was completely separate, and they had no idea how. So that's another thing to think about, actually. Okay, let's continue. Once again, the animal kingdom is invoked to fulfill the function of fathering the Redeemer. On the banks of Euphrates, men worshipped Awans or Dagon, the fish god. The fish is as a symbol of fatherhood, of motherhood, of the perpetuation of life generally constantly occurs. The letter N, Nun, and in Hebrew means fish. It is one of the original hieroglyphs standing for this idea, apparently because of the mental reactions excited in the mind by the continual repetition of this letter. There are thus a number of gods, goddesses, and eponymous heroes whose legends are functions of the letter N, which regard to this letter, see R213. It is connected with the north, and so with the starry heavens about the pole star, also with the north wind, and the reference is to the watery signs. Hence, the letter N occurs in legend of the flood and of fish gods. In Hebrew mythology, the hero concerned is Noah. Note also that the symbol of the fish has been chosen to represent the Redeemer of Phallus, the god through whose virtue man passes through the waters of death. The common name for this god in southern Italy today and elsewhere is Perseus II. So also his female counterpart, Cates, is represented by the Vesica Pisces, the bladder of the fish, and this shape is continually exhibited in many church windows and in episcopal ring, which means which means fish, and very aptly symbolizes Christ. The ring and the book, the word is a noticon of Lesso Christo Theo Huiso Soto, Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior. Yeah, so it's like this rebirth through water, and death and rebirth are all sort of happen in the water, right? because the ocean, when it's not touched and not being fucked by us, actually sort of does represent the rebirth. Like burials at sea, for example, are a common thing in some cultures, and we are born from the amniotic fluid in the womb, which is water. It's the feminine, and water is spirit, and we need water to make sure that we're able to move around and talk and all other kinds of things. And yeah, the connection to fish and water. So like Odin descended into waters. So did the Sikh. Actually, you can go look at many other religions where the prophets somehow like descended into water or depths and things like that. It's the same sort of thing, same idea. Okay, in the mythology of Yucatan, it was the old ones covered with feathers that came up out of the sea. Some have seen in this tradition a reference to the fact that man is a marine animal. Our breathing air still possesses atrophied gills. I mean, if you want to trace it that far back, yeah, we're all fundamentally, in our essence, marine animals. Well, everything is a marine animal, including a bird. So there's that to think about. So Horpakra. Fool is also evidently an aspect of Pan. But this idea is shown in his fullest development by R215, whose letter is the semi-vowel ayin, cognate with aleph, so the devil. So yeah, which is like the merging of their masculine and feminine, which actually becomes the holy hexagram. There's a few more aspects of it, but I'll go into that another time. Arriving at a highly sophisticated theogony, there appears to be a perfectly clear and concrete symbol of this doctrine. Hippocrates is the god of science, and this science has a very special meaning. See attached essay appendix. First, Ikeda, the pure being invented as an aspect of pure nothing. In his manifestation, he is not one but two. He is only one because he is zero. Think this is like sort of mentioned in the Gnostic Mass as well. To not think of me as one but as none. Because one implies an opposite, right? Because like, you know how we're talking about in my previous video, plus one and negative one? A positive one implies a negative one. And a positive 2 implies a negative 2, and so on and so forth. So as long as there is a positive, there is a negative, because they're two sides of the same coin. So ultimately, it is a nothing. It's ultimately sprung from nothing, but in order for this to have any manifestation, there had to be a split. He exists, Eheya, his divine name, which signifies I am or I shall be, is merely another way of saying that he is not, because one leads to nowhere, which is where it came from. So the only possible manifestation is in two, and the manifestation must be in silence. Because of the number 3, the number of binary understanding has not been formulated. In other words, there is no mother. All one has is the impulse of the manifestation, and that must take place in silence. That's a bit of a paradox, actually, I think. Because the logos, or the word, is in a sense a sinusoidal wave, and it's sound and that kind of thing, so there's no silence there. But it has to take place in silence. And I guess the womb, in a sense, is a silent place, and there's no words or anything. So you actually have to manifest through silence. Silence comes first, not second. So maybe meditate over that when you're like next meditating, and maybe there's a reason for silence and things come up through silence. That is to say, there is yet no more than the impulse, which is unformulated. It is only when it is interpreted that it becomes the word, the logos. Yes, just like I was saying, the logos, and I didn't even know that because it's been a while since I read this, but like I was saying before. Okay, now let's go to this one. Now consider the traditional form of Hippocrates. He is a babe, that is to say, innocent and not yet arrived at puberty, a simpler form of Parsifal. He is represented as a rose pink in color. It is dawn, the hint of light about to come, but not by any means that light. He has a lock of black hair curling around his ear, and that is the influence of the highest descending upon Brahmandra's chakra. The ear is the vehicle of a Kasha spirit. Kashik record, anyone? The ear is the vehicle of Akasha spirit. That's interesting. This is the only salient symbol. It is the only indication that he's not merely the bold baby, because it is only colored in the blood of rose pink. And it's the rose pink sort of thing, rose, like the rosy cross, because the rosy cross, it sort of represents this explosion of manifestation, but it's also like how to recongeal opposites and alchemy and that kind of thing. Basically, going back into the zero. So the rosy cross sort of represents a lot of that, and it's the stuff I'm sort of specializing in more than Kabbalah. Okay. But on the other hand, his thumb is either against his lower lip or his mouth, which is to say, one cannot say there is here a quarrel between two schools of thought. If B is pushing up his lower lip, he emphasizes silence as silence. Interesting. Silence is going on. If his thumb is in his mouth, it emphasizes the doctrine of a hair, I shall be. Yet, in the end, these doctrines are identical. This babe is in an egg of blue, which is evidently the symbol of the mother. The child has, in a way, not been born. The blue is the blue of space. The egg is sitting upon a lotus, and the lotus grows on the Nile. Now the lotus is another symbol of the mother, and the Nile is also a symbol of father fertilizing Egypt, the Yoni. But also the Nile is home of Sebek, the crocodile who threatens Hippocrates. Now that I think about it, man, like, have you ever noticed how, like, flowers actually look like an egg before they sort of open up and blossom? Same idea, I think. They do. Like, go observe any flower before, like, the petals open up, and it looks like a fucking egg. And that is something I didn't think about. And since the flower is sort of the yoni and also the lingam, that's to think about. Okay. Yet Hippocrates is not always thus represented. He is shown by certain schools of thought as standing. He is standing upon the crocodiles, and I'll refer above to the crocodile, the symbol of two exactly opposite things. Here is an analogy. One is a reminder of Hercules, the infant Hercules who spun the wheel in the house of women, of Hercules who was a strong man, who was innocent, who was ultimately a madman, who destroyed his wife and children. It is a cognate symbol. It's sort of interesting to see Hercules sort of represented as another symbol of, not really the fool, but it's sort of the same idea. And sort of suckling on the pups of Hera, and that's actually sort of where we get the name Milky Way as well, because Hera, after she realized it was Hercules suckling on her breast, she sort of spilled her milk, and it created the stars. The father, and Zeus is the wife of Hera, so there's that to think about. Where were we? Here we go. Hippocrates is in one sense a symbol of the dawn on the Nile and the physiological phenomenon which accompanies the act of waking. One sees at the other end of the octave of thought the connection of this symbol with the succession of the royal power described above. The symbol of Hippocrates itself tends to be purely philosophical. It is also the mystical absorption of the work of creation. The he final of Tetragrammaton, Hippocrates is, in fact, the passive side of his twin, Horus. Yet at the same time, he is a very full-fledged symbol of this idea, which is wind, which is air, the impregnated of the mother goddess. He is immune from all attack because of his innocence, for the innocence is perfect silence, which is the essence of virility. Maybe that is true, because I think if you have so much dissonance in your psychology, like, it's hard to be phallic or virile or anything like that. And the marriage of opposites, in a sense, actually pushes you upward, right? Closer towards the source. It's phallic. Like, this marriage of opposites is weirdly phallic. And when you think about it, that's sort of what the sun is it's like this density of matter that eventually causes a chain reaction, and it pushes all outward. So it's ironic that a lot of the ideas of masculinity actually at first actually come from the woman. Because if you're disconnected from the feminine, I guess you cannot really be masculine either. So there's also that to think about too. So for all you fucking tape boys out there, don't follow him. Like, separating yourself from any kind of feminine energy or ideas is actually dangerous to your masculinity, believe it or not. All right, continuing. The egg is not only akasha, but the original egg in the biological sense. The black egg of the element of spirit in some Hindu schools of thought from the other elements, air, water, earth, fire, in that order. Yeah, I would actually agree with that. Proceed. This egg issues from the lotus, which is the symbol of the yoni. There is a Asiatic symbol cognate with Hippocrates, and though it does not commonly direct into this card, it must be considered in connection with it. The symbol is the Buddha Rupa. He is most frequently represented sitting on a lotus, and is often there. Behind him spread the hood of the serpent. The shape of this hood is again the yoni. Note the usual ornaments of this hood, phallic and fructiform. The crocodile of the Nile was called Sebek or Mako the Devourer. In the official rituals, the idea is usually that of the fisherman who wishes protection from the assault of his totem animal. Okay. There is, however, an identity between the creator and the destroyer. In Indian mythology, Shiva fulfills both functions. See? Like opposites, once again. It's the same thing over and again. Opposites. We never seem to... It all comes back to the same fucking idea every single time. And usually the mysteries are just that simple. And we've completely screwed ourselves. Let's put it that way. Greek mythology, the god Pan is addressed Panphage and Pangenitor. All devourer, all begetter. The creator is also the destroyer, and the destroyer is also the creator. If you're not destroying, you're not creating. If you're not creating, you're not destroying. Think about that. So, like, yeah, if you're creating through active creation, you're also probably destroying something as well. And through active destruction, you're also creating. So in order for this new creation of yourself, in psychology, I guess, is to sort of destroy your old self. And I think that's what it means to sort of kill your ego. Like to destroy old ideas about yourself or anything like that. And to not remain, I guess, static. And then, because then, only then is creation possible. Or new forms of creation. So also in the initiated symbol, the act of devouring is the equivalent of initiation. As the mystic would say, my soul is swallowed up in God. Compare the symbolism of Noah and the ark, Jonah and the whale, and others. Note the end of Jonah and the meaning of the name a dove. One must constantly keep in mind the bivalence of every symbol. Bivalence, there you go. There's two sides to everything. It doesn't matter what way you spin it. Two sides to everything. It's exhausting, man. It's dizzying almost. When you think about it, like how everything is just an opposite of an opposite of an opposite of an opposite. Reflection of reflection of reflection of reflection. Yeah. Where were we? There's how. So also, one must constantly keep in mind the bivalence of every symbol. Insistence upon either one or other of the contradictory attributions inherent in a symbol is simply a mark of spiritual incapacity. And it is constantly happening because of prejudice. It is the simplest test of initiation that every symbol is understood instinctively containing its contradicting meaning in itself. Mark well the passage in The Vision and the Voice, page 136. It is shown that this heart is the heart that rejoiceth, and the serpent in the serpent of Darth. For herein all the symbols are interchangeable, for each one containeth itself its own opposite. And this is the great mystery of the supernals that are beyond the abyss, for below the abyss contradiction is division, but above the abyss, contradiction is unity, and therefore could be nothing true except by virtue of the contradiction that is contained in itself. All right, so I sort of had a lot of trouble with this. Sort of at the beginning of my journey, because like I've had to overcome a lot of my own psychological flaws, and I was quite a wretch. But the idea is that everything does contain its opposite, and it actually contains the potentiality. So in some form, my wretchedness can actually become my holiness. So if you're this wretched, sort of fucked sort of being, man, like you're actually probably more capable of holiness than some straight as an arrow upstanding accountant with a family or whatever. This isn't an attack on those kind of people, by the way, but I think every single person who has, I guess, a lot of this darkness in them is much more capable of greatness than someone who never had it in the first place. And I think that's probably one of the greatest things I've heard, because I've been speaking to someone who was formerly a meth addict, right? And he's one of the nicest guys I've ever met. But like he talks about like how he sort of was in before and after, and I think there is that potentiality to in a sense actually transcend that, and you actually become a much better person. So if you're, and I think that's also the other thing too, man. Think about it for a second. What if you're this super holy and divine person, and you find the mysteries and you become a bastard? That's also possible too. Everything contains its opposite. Everything contains its contradiction. It's a merry, merry go round. And, I think that's the reason why there's so much emphasis on opposites here, because it really is the case. It's the same thing over again. I sound like a broken record. I'm sorry, people. But I feel like it really needs to be said. It is characterized of all high spiritual vision that the form of any idea is immediately destroyed or cancelled by the arising of the contradictory. Hegel and Nietzsche had glimmerings of this idea, but it is described very fully and simply in the Book of Wisdom or Folly. The point about the crocodile is very important, because many of the traditional forms of the fool of the tarot show the crocodile definitely. In the commonplace interpretation of the card, the scholiasts say that the picture is that of a gay, careless youth with a sack full of follies and illusions. Just so you know, like gay not meaning homosexual, just happy. People have forgotten about that. Dancing along the edge of a precipice, unaware that the tiger and crocodile shown in the card are about to attack him. It is the view of a little Bethel, but to initiates, the crocodile helps to determine the spiritual meaning of the card as the return of the original Kabbalistic zero. It is the final process in the magical formula of tetragrammaton. By a flick of the wrist, she can be transmitted to reappear as the original Yod. And repeat the whole process from the beginning. Yeah, I don't think once this all is said and done that we're gonna stay still, and because energy cannot be created or destroyed, this whole process just starts again. So, in some respect, you have to find a way to long for life, because otherwise, I think constantly longing for death is actually a curse in some respects. It really is, because all you're doing is, I think, and while we're actually on the subject of opposites, actually, if you're longing for death, you're probably longing for a new life. If you're longing for death, you're longing for a new life. Remember that, people. All right. The innocence virility formula is again suggested by the introduction of the crocodile, for that was one of the biological superstitions on which they found their theogony, that the crocodile, like the vulture, had some mysterious method of reproduction. All right, now, so how many different archetypes are we? So, I'm not too sure if I'm going to be able to do everything today. So what I might do is we'll go on to this, and then I've got Milo Duquette's sort of thing here, and I'll probably get that all done in a part 3. So the Trinity, people. Or the 4, maybe, if we want to take it a step further and like go back to Malkuth, so to speak. All right. Zeus, Arentheus, in dealing with Zeus, one is immediately confronted with this deliberate confusion of the masculine and the feminine. In the Greek and Latin traditions, the same thing happens. Dionysus and Diana are twins and lovers. As soon as one utters the feminine, it leads one on the identification with the masculine, and vice versa. So as soon as you identify yourself with the feminine, you can actually identify yourself with the masculine, and vice versa. And I think that's been that's a difficult thing for people to acknowledge as normies, I guess, actually. Because, like, have you sort of noticed that, like, people who sort of like completely reject anything feminine, but like try to be masculine, but it's sort of a facade, really. It's not real. Like like it becomes a facade in of itself. So there is that. As must be the case in view of the biological facts of nature, it is only in Zeus. I'm probably butchering that. Archetypes that one gets the true hermaphroditic nature of the symbol in unified form. This is a very important fact, especially for the present purpose, because images 6F, whatever, this god recur again and again in alchemy. It is highly possible to describe this lucidity. The idea pertains to a faculty of the mind which is above the abyss, but all two-headed eagles with symbols clustering around them are indications of this idea. The ultimate sense seems to be that the original God is both male and female, which is, of course, the essential doctrine of the Kabbalah. And the thing most difficult to understand about the later debased Old Testament tradition is that it represents tetragrammaton. I just had a weird connection happen in my head, guys. I'll talk about it later, and that's why I stopped. As masculine inspired of the two feminine components, it was a tribal necessity of the savage wanderers to have an uncivilized and simple demiurge for God. The complexities and refinements of settled nations were to them mere weakness. Serve that the moment they got a promised land and the temple under Solomon, he went unwhoring after strange women and gods. If you know me personally, man, there's a strange thing about that, but I'm not going to go into it. This infuriated the die-hard prophets and led within a few years to the breach between Judah and Israel. Thanks to a whole sequence of disasters, Zeus became too popular, and in consequence, too many legends gathered around him. But the important fact for this present purpose is that Zeus was peculiarly the Lord of air. The earliest accounts relate to the distribution of three active elements as Dis, Pluto to fire, Zeus, Jupiter to air, and Poseidon, Neptune to water. Many sought the origin of nature in the earliest days. Try to find this origin in one of the elements. This history of philosophy describes the controversy between Anaximander and Xenocrates, later Empedocles. It may be that the original authors of the tarot were trying to promulgate the doctrine that the original of everything was air. Yeah, I said that in the beginning, actually. Yet, if it were so, it would upset the whole tarot as we know it. Since the order of origin makes fire the first father, it is air as zero that reconciles the antimony. Okay, that's a very interesting thing. Because fire, in some respect, is just the union of opposites, or it's the fusion, and creates light. So, Dionysus and Diana, it is true, were symbols of the air, and the Sanskrit Vedas say that the storm gods were the original gods. Yet, actually, I want to stop there for a second, because Shiva was actually, I can't remember what his original name was, but he was actually first represented as a storm god, like Zeus. So that's also another thing to consider. Yet, if the storm gods really presided over the formation of the universe as we know it, they were certainly storms of fire. To this, astronomers agree. But this theory certainly implies an identification of air and fire, and it seems as if they were thought of as before light, that is, the sun before creative energy. That is the phallus, and the idea continually suggests itself that there is here some doctrine contrary to our own most reasonable doctrine, one of which the original confusion of the elements, the tohu, bohu, it is to be put forward as the cause of order, instead of as a plastic mass on which order imposes itself. No system truly Kabbalistic makes air, in the conventional sense, the original element. The akasha is the egg of spirit, the black or dark blue egg. This suggests a form of Hippocrates in that case. By air, one really means spirit. However, this may be the actual symbol is perfectly clear and should be applied to its proper place. Yeah, air is spirit. And it can't, and you know, without air, like the fire dies, water stagnates, water doesn't move, and without our breath, we're dead. So it is spirit. It really is spirit. We're close, guys. Okay, 50 minutes. Fuck. All right. We really, yeah. I'm gonna wrap it up after here. And then we'll get into everything else later on, including like some Milo Duquette stuff. Okay. Dionysus, Zagreus, Bacchus, Diffuse. It is convenient to treat the two gods as one. Zagreus is only important to the present purpose because he possesses horns, and because in the Eleusinian mysteries, it is said he was torn to pieces by the Titans, but Athena rescued his heart and carried it to his father, Zeus. His mother was Demeter. He is thus the fruit of the marriage of heaven and earth. This identifies him as the vow of Tetragrammaton by the legends of his death refer to initiation, which accords with the doctrine of the devourer. In this card, however, the traditional form is much more clearly expressive of Bacchus Diffuse, who represents a more superficial form of worship. The ecstasy characteristics of the god is more magical than mystical. The latter demands in the name Lacus, whereas Bacchus has Semele for a mother who was visited by Zeus in the form of a flash of lightning, which destroyed her. But she was already pregnant by him, and Zeus saved the child until puberty was hidden in the thigh, i.e. the phallus of Zeus. Yeah, that makes sense, actually. Maybe sewing a child into your dick is not the best spot. So the next best spot is a thigh. Hera, in revenge for her husband's infidelity with Semele, drove the boy mad. This is the direct connection with the card. Okay. That is a good point, actually. So maybe, like, in some respect, I guess with the Fool, you have to be driven. Like, there needs to be some kind of, in order for divine madness, you have to be driven mad to in the first place. There has to be madness that did happen. You know, being driven mad, whether it be through extreme trauma or PTSD or that other kind of thing. And I think when we're talking about like madness and like that kind of thing, it's referring to Hera and the feminine and the mother of the universe. Okay. Legend of Bacchus is, first of all, that he was diffuse, double-natured, and this appears to me more bisexual than hermaphroditic. His madness is also a phase of his intoxication. For he is preeminently the god of the vine. He goes dancing through Asia, surrounded by various companions, all saying with enthusiasm, they carry staffs headed with pine cones entwined with ivy. They also clash cymbals, and in some legends are furnished with swords or twined about with serpents. All the half-gods of the forest are the male companions of the Maenad women. In his pictures, his drunken face and the languid state of his lingam connect with the legend already mentioned about the crocodile. His constant attendant is the tiger. And in all best extant examples of the card, the tiger or panther is represented as jumping upon him from behind, while the crocodile is ready to devour him in the front. In the legend of his journey through Asia, it is said to have ridden on an ass, which connects him with Priapus. I didn't know that, actually. That's new. Who is said to have been his son by Aphrodite. It is also reminds of one of the triumphal entry into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. It is curious too that all the fabled birth of Jesus, the Virgin Mama, is represented as being between an ox and an ass, and one remembers that the letter Aleph means ox. I guess it's sort of going back to what I was saying in the first video. In the worship of Bacchus, there was a representative of the god, and he was chosen for his quality as a young and virile but effeminate man. Yeah, do you, like I was saying, man, like extremely virile but also really effeminate. That should give you a massive fucking clue of what it means to be masculine. Okay. Do you see? Um, it's the same thing. Like the feminine doesn't exist without the masculine, and vice versa, right? And I think in some respect, in one sense, to be a super masculine bloke, you also have to be really feminine in some respects. Otherwise, you become kind of gross. So there you go. In the course of the centuries, the worship naturally became degraded. Other ideas joined themselves to the original form, and partly because of the original character of the ritual, the idea of the fool took definite shape. Hence, he came to be represented with a fool's cap, evidently phallic. That's actually, yeah, you know the dunce hat. It's phallic. I think that's sort of the same sort of idea. The fool's hat. And clad in motley, which again recalls the coat of many colors worn by Jesus and by Joseph. This symbolism is not only mercurial, but zodiacal, Joseph and Jesus. So the symbol is not only mercurial. I think that's kind of interesting because Mercury sort of has like weird colors when you look at it. It like sort of it has a, like, from what I remember from memory, it has like sort of like a rainbowy sort of shimmer. So I think that's also the other part of it. The zodiacal, Joseph and Jesus were 12 brothers or 12 disciples, equally represent the sun in the midst of the 12 signs. It was only very much later that any alchemical significance was attributed to this, and that at a time when the Renaissance scholars made rather a point of finding something serious and important symbols which were in reality quite frivolous. Yeah, so there's that whole kind of thing. Anyway, okay, we are nearly there, guys. We're almost there. Happy. Yep, so Baphomet. There is no doubt that this mysterious figure is the magical image of the same idea. Developed in so many symbols, its pictorial correspondence is most easily seen in the figures of Zeus, Herophilus, and Babylon, in the extraordinary obscene representations of the Virgin Mother, which are found among the remains of early Christian iconology. The subject is dealt with at considerable length in Pain Night, where the original origin of the symbol and the meaning of the name is investigated. Von Hammer-Purgstall was certainly right in supposing Baphomet to be a form of the bull god, or rather the bull-slaying god, Mithras. For Baphomet should be spelt with an R at the end, Baphomer. Interesting. For it's clear a corrupting meaning Father Mithras. There is also here a connection with the Ars, for it was an arse-headed god that he became an object of veneration to the Templars. The early Christians also were accused of worshipping an arse or arse-headed god, and this again is connected with the wild arse of the wilderness, the god Set, identified with Saturn and Satan. He is the south as well as the north. The Egyptians had a desert and an ocean in those quarters. Yeah, so like the devil, I guess, and I think that's just the devouring of opposites, or the creation, even. Creation, destruction. Satan does both. Hail Satan. And I just want to say, when I say Hail Satan, I don't mean that in like go fucking read Anton LaVey and that kind of thing. I think that just needs to be really fucking said. Like, I understand what I'm saying when I say Hail Satan, not the typical edgelord shits who get into Satanism. Anyway, right, so we're at the summary, ladies and gentlemen. It has seemed convenient to deal separately with these main forms of the idea of the fool, but no attempt has been made or should be made to prevent the legends overlapping or coalescing. The variations of expression, even when contradictory in appearance, should lead to an intuitive apprehension of the symbol by sublimation sublimation, and transcendence of the intellectual. All these symbols of the trumps ultimately exist in a region beyond reason and above it. The study of these cards has for its most important aim the training of the mind to think clearly and coherently in this exalted manner. This has always been characteristics of the methods of initiation as understood by the Hierophants. In the confused dogmatic period of Victorian materialization, it was necessary for science to discredit all attempts to transcend the rationalist mode of approach to reality. Yet it was the progress of science itself that had reintegrated these differentials. For the very beginning of the present century, the practical science of the mechanician and the engineer has been forced further and further towards finding the theoretical justification in mathematical physics. Mathematics has always been the most severe, abstract, and logical of the sciences. Yet even in comparatively early schoolboy mathematics, cognizance must be taken of the unreal and the irrational. Surds and infinite series are the very root forms of advanced mathematical thought. There you go. The apotheosis of mathematical physics is now the admission of failure to find reality in any single intelligible idea. The modern reply to the question, what is anything, is that in relation to a chain of 10 ideas, any one of which can only be interpreted in terms of the rest. The Gnostics would identically have called this a chain of 10 aeons. These 10 ideas must by no means be considered an aspect of some reality in the background, as the supposed straight line, which was the framework of calculation, had turned out to be a curve. So has the point which has always been taken as the top of existence become the ring. It is important to doubt that here is a continually closer approximation of the profane science of the outer world of the sacred wisdom of the initiate. The design of the present card resumes the principal ideas of the above essays. The fool is of the gold of air. He has the horns of Dionysus Zagreus, and between them is the phallic cone of white representing the influence of the crown from the crown Keter. See the position of path of Aleph and on the tree of life. Upon him, he is shown against the background of air dawning from space, and his attitude is that of one bursting unexpectedly upon the crowd. He is clad in green according to the tradition of spring, but his shoes are of the phallic gold of the sun. In his right hand, he bears the wand tipped with a pyramid of light of the Old Father. In his left hand, he is bear the flaming pine cone of similar significance, but more definitely indicating vegetable growth. And from his left shoulder hangs a bunch of purple grapes representing fertility, sweetness, and the basis of ecstasy. This ecstasy is shown by the stem of the grapes developing into rainbow-hued spirals, the form of the universe. This suggests the threshold, threefold veil of the negative manifesting by its intervention in divided light. Upon the spiral whorl are the attributions of the godhead, the vulture of Malt, the dove of Venus, Isis or Mary, and the ivy sacred of his devotees. This is all the butterfly of many-colored air and the winged globe with his twin serpents, a symbol which is echoed and fortified by the twin infants embracing on the middle spiral. Above them hangs the benediction of three flowers. Fawning upon him is the tiger, and beneath his feet the Nile with its lotus stem crowds the crocodile, resuming all his many forms and many-colored images. In the center of the figure, the focus of the microcosm is the radiant sun. The whole picture is a glyph of the creative light. Oh yeah, it's just referring to the image of the fool here. Actually, I'll zoom in on that a little bit. So yeah, as you can see, there's sort of this the grapes, the spiral, actually stemming from the. I actually didn't notice that it's stemming from grapes, like the manifestation of the universe, and the tiger and the crocodile at his feet, the tiger behind him, crocodile below him, and the caduceus staff and the phallus. There's also a moon somewhere, I'm pretty sure, but yeah, that and the dove. That concludes the part 1 of The Fool. I learnt a lot during this. Like, I'm just going to continue doing this even if people don't fucking watch them, man, because like I've noticed I sort of come to understand things a bit differently each time I do it. So when you're teaching, teaching, when you're teaching, I've learnt today actually, is you sort of reinforce it and you actually learn new things. The teacher becomes the teached. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. If you like this content, please like, share, subscribe on Substack and on YouTube. I am now more or less putting most of my content through Substack, and then it's sort of diverting through to YouTube. I enjoyed this. Happy holidays. Have a great Christmas, Yule, Saturnalia, whatever the fuck you want to call it. And I'll see you later.